It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
Hello there, and welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. Our host is Kent Myers. Kent's one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, but not sure that legal expert's going to apply much to this show.
It won't, and I sometimes wonder if it ever does, and my partners wonder about the same thing. Today we're going to be talking about basketball, hoops. There are thousands of young people in the state that play high school basketball every year. There are hundreds of kids that go on to play during the remainder of the year something called AAU basketball. And quite frankly, the premier players coming out of Oklahoma have pretty much made a name for themselves in the AAU basketball arena as well as the high school. And we want to have Joe Crawford on. We've wanted to have him on for a while, and we're having him on today. Joe is a basketball coach in the AAU arena and has been extremely successful. And we're calling this show AAU Doing It the Right Way, because there's obviously a right way to do AAU basketball that doesn't get much publicity. And there's a wrong way to do it that gets quite a bit from time to time, and I think it's important for us to let our viewers know the difference.
AAU basketball, courts of a different kind, this week on The Verdict.
Very good.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce our guest.
We're pleased today to welcome Joe Crawford to our show. Joe's been a friend of mine for a number of years, and he is a basketball expert. But a little bit more about Joe. He's a native of Ohio. He played college basketball at Ohio Valley College in West Virginia, the Fighting Scots. He graduated from Oklahoma Christian University. He has coached both at the high school and the college level. And today he's the Academy Director of Sports City U Basketball Academy in Oklahoma City. Joe coaches both boys and girls teams in the non-high school season in competitive basketball arenas. Joe's, as an example of what kind of success he has had, his girls 17 and under team this year won the state AAU championship, won championships in Plano, Texas, and in Edmond, and participated in the national tournament in Orlando, Florida. They finished the season with a 31-9 record against the very best basketball players in the country. So Joe is coaching at a very high level of basketball in the competitive arena as well. This is his first visit to The Verdict, and Joe, we appreciate so much you giving us your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Let me ask you, I started out the show talking about AAU basketball. Is that the right term we ought to be using to discuss what we're going to talk about?
Well, I think for years people have used the term AAU basketball to kind of refer to competitive basketball, in which case I believe that competitive basketball is just that. It's being able to play at the level at which it'll make kids better and more competitive when they get to their school ball seasons. And AAU just happens to be one of those tournaments that a competitive team would probably play in during the summertime.
Well, what is it exactly that you do? How would you describe your role?
Well, the team aspect of what I do kind of came later, because the thing that I really do is I teach kids how to score. I am an offensive skills specialist. I teach shooting, offensive moves, teaching kids how to create space and score, ball handling, that type of thing. And I do that because that's what we are severely lacking in today's game of basketball is basically the fundamental game. And just by training kids, I've had so many kids come through my academy and through my camps that wanted to play. I started putting teams together. And just kind of out of something that would be extra on top of what I'm already doing with our skill development programs. And we started with 1 or 2 teams, and we have had as many as 30 teams playing for us at any given time.
Now, it seems typically we think of boys playing basketball, but there's a growing number of girls. Is it even yet, or is there even more girls than boys?
You know, from my point of view, I see girls basketball far exceeding boys in numbers and in terms of training. I would say that 75% of all the clientele that come through my academy is probably girls. And for the most part, there's still a large number of boys obviously doing the same things, but the girls are more interested in the development and the training in that aspect as opposed to the boys.
Let me ask you a question about age of players. When should girls or boys, if they're going to want to try to play basketball, when should they begin their development?
Well, if you've been keeping up with the Olympics and the gymnastics and all the things that are going on in the past, you know, since this is an Olympic year, one of the things that you'll see is some of the young competitive arenas are starting at the ages of 4, 5, 6. And there's a lot of question out there when you should start kids in competitive arenas. I believe that you should start their training as soon as they want to start training. As soon as they want to start playing a little bit, you can start kids. I believe if they're hungry, feed them. That's kind of how we go about this. Now, as far as the skills portion, that's one thing. But putting young kids into a competitive arena where wins and losses become important, that's a different matter. I believe the kids can start training when they're 4 or 5 for basketball, getting a ball in their hand, learning to dribble, learning to shoot, those type of things. But as far as competitive basketball, it's usually around 4th grade, is usually around the grade where kids start to understand the win and loss concept and really start focusing on how to play team basketball.
Let me ask you another question. I know there's a high school basketball and then there's competitive basketball. Are they important to each other? Do they conflict with each other?
They are important to each other and they conflict with each other. I mean, it's kind of one of those things, a double-edged sword, if you, so to speak. There's a lot of high school coaches out there that would just rather not have their kids play AAU basketball because of the experiences those kids have had or that coach has had with AAU basketball. And I don't even mean AAU, I just mean the competitive part, because there's so much good to playing off-season.
How do the seasons join?
Usually, as far as timing is concerned, by the end of a high school season, you're looking at somewhere around March. Kids usually take a break. There used to be a dead period in there where the Oklahoma secondary schools would not allow kids to participate until the end of track season. And now that is no longer in existence, and now what we have is basically kids can start playing, and there's a lot of, I say, invitational tournaments or tournaments that are there for exposure purposes for colleges in the month of April, where these competitive teams would go and start playing basically in the month of April and would probably play all the way through until August.
How do you go about developing players?
Well, there's a lot to be said for the term development, because a lot of people believe that if you're playing on a team and you're playing year-round that you're developing, and that's just not the case. You see that through our Olympic men's team, I would say. You know, because what happens is we play all the time and we take very little time to develop kids' weaknesses. And so when you ask about developing a team, I would say that you're playing at a competitive level at which the kids can experience competitive basketball, but then there's also some downtime where those kids are developing their own individual skills, so they're increasing their ability to score and their ability to move their feet and even their quickness and athletic performance. And so all of those things have to be hand in hand for the kids to really develop.
So just playing competitive games isn't enough?
It's not enough. And that's what's going on. I mean, that's what we think. People call me all the time, say, I want my kid to be better, I want to get him ready for high school. Do you have a team I can put him on? Well, that's not how you do it.
You mentioned the Olympic team, and they were criticized for some of their play. Are there players at the NBA level that you think are doing it right, and you would tell your players, watch this player, he has excellent offensive skills or fundamentals down? Give me 1 or 2 names that you think a young player would be good to emulate.
Well, as far as on the court, Kobe Bryant. You know, that's on the court as far as his skills are concerned. And then LeBron James, the new up-and-coming young star that is just phenomenal offensively. One of those kids that has worked a lot. You can tell.
Now, they're kind of flashy, though, so it surprises me a little bit that a coach that stresses fundamentals would pick two guys who are, ESPN highlight guys.
You said offensive skills.
I did.
And those guys are offensive skill oriented. Those guys are not team players. You didn't ask me about team players. And that's the difference. I mean, I wouldn't go, if you want to see the best fundamental basketball, probably anywhere, go to small towns and watch girls basketball. Because that's where the best coaches are. See, over in Europe, the way that their structure is set up is their best coaches their youth. And here, where do our best coaches go? To the top. And if you want to see kids who know how to set screens, who know how to play team basketball, it's girls basketball, and it's typically at the smaller schools.
Joe Crawford's our guest. Kent Myers and I'll be back with Joe after this. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers, and our guest, Joe Crawford. Now, Joe, sometimes AAU basketball has a stigma in which coaches are accused of, I'll use the term, stealing players from other players and all trying to create this super team on either a statewide or a regional basis. So what's your viewpoint of all that?
Well, I believe that that obviously goes on. Recruiting is a huge part of AAU basketball, and it's a huge part of competitive basketball, even at young ages. Many coaches go out, and the object is to win games. And the fastest way to burn kids out is to put them in a competitive arena. And, that's one of the reasons by the age of 13, 75% of all young basketball players drop out or quit because they're burnt out. And a part of that is because of how we go about putting pressure on kids to win. And there's nothing wrong with being a part of a winning team. That's a great factor to have as far as developing the idea of competitiveness and trying to win and all of that. But I think what we overlook is those kids who aren't capable of playing on those teams. And from my standpoint, I believe that kids should learn how to develop into a program as opposed to just be recruited to a top team and go win. Even the kids who are seniors in high school are still in a learning phase. And to me, a learning phase is one of those areas in life where you're having to fight through and battle to win. And when you're put on some of those top teams and you're being recruited for those teams, you don't get to learn any of that. You don't get to go through that developmental phase that you win and then you lose and you got to overcome the losing. And so I think that the recruiting part of it has really gone way overboard in a lot of the competitive basketball in the summertime. I think a lot of feelings are hurt. I think a lot of kids end up quitting, and it's just really a mess, I think, in as far as the competitive arena goes in recruiting for competitive basketball.
I know, Joe, that you have said on other occasions that you develop your players, you don't recruit your players. Let's talk about development a little bit. First of all, you're the director of the Sports City U Basketball Academy, and where is that located in
It's located at the Lighthouse Sports and Fitness on 3333 West Hefner Road, east of Hefner Lake. And we also travel and do clinics around the state. I can take my basketball goals. I have 15 traveling goals that go with me, and I do shooting clinics from Broken Bow, to Wakita. So I'm pretty much all over the state doing shooting clinics and offensive skill development clinics.
I wanted to ask you about that. You go into a Broken Bow, for instance, and you'll be there a day or two. And just without getting into too much detail, just very generally, what do you do?
Well, typically when I do that, I'm not working as the summertime competitive coach. I'm working to help fulfill the needs of high school coaches around the state. And I'll go into a high school setting, take a high school team, teach them my shooting techniques, go through our offensive footwork and skill development series, and try to do that in 1 or 2 or 3 days, however long they want me to be there. And then I'll come back and do touch-ups with those coaches periodically through the year to make sure that those kids are still on track. And after a period of a couple years, those teams really show a lot of success in their scoring percentages as well as the number of points that they're scoring per game.
Let me get you off the subject a little bit. If tomorrow we named you the head of the United States Olympic Committee and said, how should we have a basketball team? How should we formulate basketball for our Olympic team? How would you like to see basketball designed for the United States Olympic team?
I would go back and watch the Miracle again because that's how I believe it should be done. It's not necessarily the best athletes in the world that you need to recruit, and you can see that. I mean, one of our first games earlier this year when we played Italy in the Olympics, you know, we were obviously dominant athleticism. We were just dominant, but we got beat by 30.
Did you want to use the NBA players?
I would want to open it up to anybody. You know,
trials.
I would have, you know, just a regular tryout, and I would pick the players who are going to get it done. And we don't do that. And what we do is we take our NBA players because they're the best players, and there are some in there. And maybe the NBA players that we're not picking are the ones we need to pick. You know, there's some guys out there that play good team basketball that have the skills that I think could fit into a team concept that could bring, you know, America back on top with basketball again.
Joe, I know that no matter how skilled the player is that plays for you, and they vary widely in skill and in age and experience, you run them through agility drills, dribbling drills, passing drills, and the whole thing, even though some of the older ones might think they know it already. Why do you do that?
Well, I had this same conversation yesterday with someone, and one of the things that I've seen happen is some of those players that come to me who may be a pinnacle player or a top-notch caliber basketball player, when they first come in there, they have that little chip on their shoulder that thinks, well, you know, I don't need to be doing this stuff, until I sit them down and break down to them exactly their weaknesses and where they need to improve at, and then all of a sudden a light comes on. And that player says, man, that's neat. I mean, I see areas that could really make me or take me to the next level as far as playing is concerned.
What role should a parent have in the development of the kids playing basketball? What's the relationship between the parent and coach, parent and the child?
I believe that first of all, the parents need to find somebody who cares about their kid. I don't care about the basketball development. If you don't find a coach that's going to take your kids and care about them, then they're not going to get what they need. First of all, you need to find somebody who you can look in their eyes and you know, trust them to babysit your kid, first of all. And that's the type of coach that you need. And then you need to decide whether that coach is going to be able to take that kid skill development-wise and improve those skills. And that comes with experience. And so you need to find someone who's been around basketball.
If a parent comes to you just out of the blue and you don't know anything about them or their child and asks you whether or not their child should be involved in competitive basketball in the high school off-season, what do you tell them?
I say without a doubt. If they are not involved in some sort of AAU or competitive type program in the summer times, they're probably not doing enough basketball that's really going to get them to the next level. Now, if they're just a recreational player and they just want to play a little bit in school ball, they really don't want to maybe go play in college or something like that, then, you know, maybe the summertime basketball is not for them. But for those kids who really want to go to the next level, play at the college level, and improve their skills year-round, then they need to be playing competitive basketball in some form or fashion.
Just real quickly, as a coach, which is harder to coach, a boys' 15-year-old team or a girls' 15-year-old team?
It all depends on the players. It really does. I mean, your girls really listen and learn quickly, and then you have those boys who are hungry that really want to, and they do as well. I think that your girls have a tendency to be a little more focused on the fundamentals and listen, and the boys sometimes feel like they have already arrived in some cases, but the boys really have done a good job as far as taking the things that you teach them, and then when you're not looking, applying it. And so, but the girls have a little less trouble doing that. They'll just go out and work at it on a regular basis. But both, I think, have their ups. So.
Joe, we're out of time. Appreciate you coming on The Verdict.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Keep up the good work you're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys for having me on.
Kent and I'll be back with the final word after this. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers. We're here to wrap up another show.
A good show today, a different show for The Verdict, but we had Joe Crawford with us, who spent some time telling us about how you do competitive basketball correctly and how players are developed. I've seen Joe in operation. He has a coaching style that makes the kids that play for him just absolutely do the best they possibly can in all circumstances, and yet have a good time and enjoy it and not take it too seriously, and certainly not take themselves too seriously. He runs quite a fine program at Sports City U at the Lighthouse in Oklahoma City, developing players, and the one, if you spend enough time with it, you can actually see the players develop right in front of your eyes, being able to do things in a game situation they couldn't do even in practice before. He's got an amazing way with kids, and he does a grand job, and he knows how to take care of the parents as well. Sometimes that's more trouble than the kids. Let's talk about the next show. Next week we're going to have Dr. Smidley, the president of Oklahoma State University, join us. We have in the past had Dr. Halligan, the past president. Now we're going to have Dr. Smidley join us and tell us about what's going on at Oklahoma State University.
I want to give you a phone number where you can get more information from Coach Joe Crawford if you'd like it. His number in Oklahoma City, area code 405-816-HOOP, 816-HOOP. That's 4667. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.